The actors who fooled entire German army.
Fiction. But on the night of 18 March 1945, just west of the Rhine River near the German town of Viersen, it was deadly reality.
Cold rain drifted across the flat Rhineland fields.
The distant thunder of artillery rolled along the horizon.
To the east, across the broad, black ribbon of the Rhine, units of the German Army Group H dug in, waiting
For what they knew must come. An American assault to force the last great natural barrier into the heart of Germany.
What they couldn't know was that the American divisions forming up opposite them were, in large part, an illusion.
Just a few miles behind the 9th U.S. Army's front line, a strange unit went to work under cover of darkness. The 23rd Headquarters Special Troops.
They were not a normal combat formation.
Their ranks were filled with illustrators and set designers, radio men and sound engineers.
Men who, before the war, had walked the stages of Broadway, painted in New York studios, or studied at art schools in Chicago and Philadelphia.
Now, in muddy German farm fields, they would mount the most audacious production of their lives.
Their mission, to convince the German High Command that 2 full American divisions were massing to cross the Rhine near Viersen.
All with roughly 1,100 men, a fleet of inflatable tanks, giant loudspeakers, and sheer acting skill.
What happened next would become one of the most remarkable and secret deceptions of the Second World War.
The story of these actors began far from the Rhine, almost a year earlier.
On 20 January 1944, at Camp Forest, the U.S. Army quietly activated a new and highly unusual unit.
Under the command of a colonel, the 23rd was assembled not to attack, but to deceive.
It combined several specialized units into one.
Experts in visual deception, sonic deception, fake radio traffic, and security.
Officers scoured art schools and advertising agencies, fashion houses and design firms.
They recruited men who knew how to build sets, paint scenery, and sell illusions.
In uniform, they would now play a different kind of role, posing as officers, MPs, or mechanics from units that didn't exist nearby.
Their tools were as unconventional as their mission.
Lightweight rubber and canvas inflatables that looked, from the air, like M4 Sherman tanks or 155mm howitzers. 500-pound speakers that could blast the recorded sounds of an armored division up to 15 miles away.
Radio operators trained to mimic the signal fingerprints of specific divisions.
After landing in France 2 weeks after D-Day, the 23rd carried out a series of increasingly daring deceptions.
They learned that a small, well-rehearsed lie, properly staged, could move entire enemy divisions.
By March 1945, as Allied forces closed on the Rhine, the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops had become a secret weapon.
Now, they were about to attempt their most ambitious performance, Operation Viersen.
The strategic situation in March 1945 was clear and urgent.
The Allies had reached the Rhine along a broad front.
In the north, Montgomery's 21st Army Group and Simpson's 9th U.S. Army prepared for Operation Plunder.
Opposite them, the German Army Group H fought a desperate delaying action.
Despite months of losses, they still commanded dangerous reserves, Panzer and Panzer Grenadier divisions.
Intelligence warned that the Germans were watching every bend of the Rhine.
So a plan was formed.
While real American forces prepared to cross near Wesel, the 23rd would stage an elaborate deception near Viersen, Anrath, and Dulken.
Their orders were stark. Make the Germans believe that the battle-winning stroke would fall here.
By 1400 hours on 18 March 1945, the first trucks rolled into muddy fields outside Anrath. Men in helmets and greatcoats jumped down, not to dig in, but to unpack air compressors and huge bundles of folded rubber.
Within hours, the actors went to work.
Canvas and rubber shapes were spread out on the frozen ground. Valves were attached, Compressors chug to life. Slowly, impossible objects began to swell and rise from the earth.
Rows of M4 Sherman tanks, their turrets frozen in mid-swing.
M7 Priest self-propelled guns, barrels elevated towards an unseen enemy.
Jeeps, trucks, and even fuel Bowsers. Entire motor pools appearing where, that morning, there had been only furrows and hedges.
By nightfall, whole armored columns stood where no real armored column existed.
From the air, they looked utterly convincing.
At the same time, teams from the 3132nd Signal Service Company positioned their massive loudspeaker trucks.
Technicians loaded wire recordings, painstakingly crafted soundscapes of an American division in motion. By 2100 hours, the empty fields around Viersen echoed with the roar of invisible engines. The clatter of metal on metal, shouted commands, and the grinding rumble of vehicles crossing imaginary bridges.
Radio operators set up in commandeered farmhouses began their own performance.
Tapping out traffic in the call signs and rhythms of the 30th and 79th Infantry Divisions.
Meanwhile, the men of the 406th Engineer Combat Company and hand-picked sign painters fanned out along the roads.
They erected unit signs, altered bumper markings, and filled local cafes and bars with staged conversations.
I hear the 30th's going in first, one lieutenant would say. Yeah, and the 79th's artillery is stacked all the way back to the river, his companion would reply.
It was theater, performed in uniform, under wartime conditions.
Behind the illusion of strength, there were no real armored divisions.
No heavy artillery brigades, just 1,000 men with a handful of real guns, some machine guns, and a vast quantity of rubber and recordings.
If the Germans saw through the act, the 23rd would be horribly exposed.
By 20 March, the tension was palpable.
German aerial reconnaissance had begun to pay attention.
As they passed over Anrath and Dulken, they would see exactly what they expected.
Tank parks, motor pools, artillery positions, and vehicle convoys.
But success brought danger. The more convincing the picture, the more likely the Germans were to react with fire. Just after 1600 hours on 20 March, the first German artillery shells began to fall. Men dived for foxholes as high-explosive rounds churned the wet soil.
Shrapnel tore through an inflatable howitzer only yards away, the rubber gun sagging, mortally wounded by a shell that would have killed a real crew.
In a nearby farmhouse, officers of the 23rd studied maps and listened to reports from the front.
Intercepts suggested German attention was focusing on their sector.
The deception was dangerously convincing.
At 2100 hours, with enemy artillery still probing and the possibility of a German attack growing, a hard decision lay before their commander. He could pull back the sound trucks and inflatables, or hold the line and keep the show going.
He chose to keep the curtain up.
The word went down through the ranks. No let up.
Hold position. For 3 long nights, under sporadic artillery fire and constant threat, the 23rd continued to act their parts. On the morning of 22 March,
Allied intelligence began to notice a pattern.
German reports spoke of at least 2 infantry divisions and supporting armor opposite Viersen.
Staff officers plotted phantom divisions on their maps, accepting them as real.
In response, 2 of their few remaining mobile divisions shifted to confront this threat.
They were bracing for a blow that would never fall.
At 2100 hours on 23 March, the real guns opened up further north, and the true assault across the Rhine began. While the enemy looked the wrong way, the Ghost Army's deception helped open the door into the heart of Germany.